Previously in the complete creation.
Yet the river seemed to specifically go out of its way to do the impossible and climb thousands of feet to go up and over this mountain and to start cutting the canyon. Hello and welcome back again, and thank you for persisting through this long and exhaustive look at the history, philosophy, and science behind the creation-evolution debate. We've been discussing the history and primarily geology thus far, as that's where the debate actually got its start. The attempt to replace the biblical story of Noah and the great worldwide flood with a new history of deep time. And most people do not see the connection at first, but its significance cannot be overstated. Jesus spoke of the Genesis account, and Noah and the great worldwide flood as a historical fact. So, if the geology of the world is the result of millions of years of deep time and not a global flood because there has never been a global flood, then that means Jesus was not God or he was a liar. In either case, if we can't believe him about history, why on earth should we believe him about the future? This is why the great flood of Noah and geology is so significant. And so we've been examining some of the overwhelming scientific and geological evidence of that great flood, truly global in scale. The rock layers we see all around the world were originally interpreted as caused by the great worldwide flood of Noah. The new history of deep time was an attempt to bring about a reinterpretation of those rock layers. In recent years, uniformitarian geology has been replaced by the new geology called actualism. And actualism allows for major catastrophes, but still does not allow a past global flood. So therefore, it is just as scientifically bankrupt as uniformitarianism. It is a priori assumptions. You've ruled out possibilities before you even consider the evidence, and that is anti-science. Dr. Derek Ager was the former president of the British Geological Association and popularized this new geology in his books like The Nature of the Stratigraphic Record or The New Catastrophism. Ager just loved to hate young Earth creationists and routinely expressed his open, flagrant bigotry towards them in his writings. I would suggest this was a defense mechanism, because his books detailed his extensive knowledge of geology and paleontology, and he had to admit that the evidence supported catastrophe. But clearly the implications irked him to no end. Not willing to bow to the possibility of a past global flood and God's judgment, he plainly, and sometimes profoundly, laid out the geological evidence and then tried to argue that it was numerous catastrophes over many billions of years and not one gigantic catastrophe. Behold the cognitive dissonance of this hostile witness as he details the global phenomenon of these rock layers while simultaneously trying to deny they were the result of a global flood. I was taken by a Turkish friend to visit a cliff section in Upper Cretaceous sediments near Sile on the Black Sea coast. In the Turkish literature, these were described as white limestones with chert nodules and strange-sounding list of fossils. But what I in fact saw was the familiar white chalk of Northwest Europe with black flints and old fossil friends such as Micraster and Echinocoris. What I was looking at was identical with the White Cliffs of Dover in England and the rolling plateau of Picardy in France, the quarries of southern Sweden, and the cliffs of eastern Denmark. We have long known, of course, that the white chalk facies of late Cretaceous times extended all the way from Antrim in Northern Ireland, via England and northern France, through the Low Countries, northern Germany, southern Scandinavia, to Poland, Bulgaria, and eventually to Georgia in the south of the Soviet Union. We also knew of the same facies in Egypt and Israel. My record was merely an extension of that vast range to the south side of the Black Sea. Nevertheless, there is even worse to come, for on the other side of the Atlantic in Texas, we find the Austin chalk of the same age and character, and found in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama. And most surprising of all, much farther away still in Western Australia, we have the Gin chalk of late Cretaceous age, with the same black flints and the same familiar fossils resting, as in Northwest Europe, on glauconic sands. Dr. Ager called this phenomenon persistence of facies. Now, facies is just a word for a rock layer. He waxed eloquently about several facies that persisted for huge extents, sometimes even across multiple continents. So, layers of rock that could literally be traced for tens of thousands of kilometers. Those chalk layers he spoke of. I have personally conducted a lot of study in those layers, and in fact, those fossil clams that I showed you in the last lecture were from those chalk and limestone layers in Texas. Ager brings up other layer formations like the Triassics of Texas, which extend across Newfoundland and are also found in Northwest Europe. In Ager's words, the similarities are almost laughable, and indeed they are. The Carboniferous formations of Joggins and all of Nova Scotia can be traced all over the east coast of Canada, down into Pennsylvania and Tennessee. Across the pond in England, Northern Europe, and Asia, and none of these rock formations are to be lightly considered. They are usually hundreds of meters to kilometers thick. Now, I compiled this map to give you an idea using one example layer, but I need to make several disclaimers and qualifying statements. This is a map of those Austin chalks and limestones that Ager wrote about, marked in yellow. I compiled this map based on the maps of the late Cretaceous seas, maps produced by evolutionary geologists. There were several difficulties in producing this map, though. First, there are a number of huge regions where you will not find any of these Cretaceous chalks or limestones. The evolutionary geologists believe those deposits were there, but have since been eroded away, or whatever happened. Those deposits are not there now, but they believed they were there originally. So this map is based on what the evolutionary geologists are claiming and assuming. The other problem has to do with continental drift. Because these evolutionary geologists accept continental drift, they have to pick a model of that continental drift. The basis for most Pangea models is from Bullard et al. In 1965. They put together the continents in this way based on the outline of the continental shelf. Now, like Pellegrini, they were specifically trying to match Africa and South America together because that is the first most prominent fit everybody sees. But like Pellegrini, Bullard et al. Took a lot of liberties in making the continents fit together. For example, what's difficult to see unless you actually lay their map out onto a present-day map is that they reduced the size of Africa by as much as a third. This is especially noteworthy as they discuss in their paper how you can't use the present shorelines of the continents because the shoreline can change radically by merely changing sea level just a little bit. And they are correct. For example, take a look at this map of the world and the continental shelves surrounding the continents and they make up the shallowest part of the oceans. They are highlighted in cyan here. And so if you lower sea level by a mere 300 feet, all these continental shelves suddenly become exposed. You get land bridges connecting the major continents, and the shapes of the continents increases greatly, including Africa, adding, some 20 kilometers of land just to its western shores. So why Bullard and team chose to expand the size of Africa to the continental shelf, yet drastically reduce the overall size of the continent in their model, it's a bit of a mystery, other than to make a better fit. And I don't want my critique to sound too harsh here either. I mean, hey, you gotta make proposals, right? You need to make a model and propose it. This is their model. Now, I have serious questions about it, and I question the justification of the decisions, but hey, it's a model. So, in their model, they also removed most of Mexico and Central America. They ignored most of Asia, Russia, and the Middle East, Australia, and Antarctica. And again, in all fairness, I'll even accept that. I realize they chose to focus in on specific continental fits. But what continents and land masses they did keep, they rotated. All of them relative to each other, apparently with no other justification other than to make the best fit. Now, it is fascinating. You can see here in their drawing where the continental shelves overlap in red, and where there's a gap, it's blue. But the issue we face here, and the reason I bring this up, is that the assumed shape and position of the continents on the planet in the past is radically different and usually not based on actual evidence. There's no reason to conclude that Africa was 1/3 smaller in the past compared to today. Yet, when you look at maps composed of the alleged epochs of times past, all of the continents are shown to be radically different in shape, size, and position on Earth. Many times, evidence like the Earth's magnetic field recorded in the rocks is completely disregarded as it flat out refutes the proposed location and shape of the continents. Furthermore, in a later lecture, we're going to look at evidence from the ocean floors that indicate that the continents did drift apart and did so at speeds of tens of miles per hour. So all of this jockeying and changing of the continents is already hard to swallow, but now you have to remove the deep time as well. So all of this continental division would have happened in a matter of days to weeks, not hundreds of millions of years. So, taking all of this with a really big chunk of salt, I based my map on the evolutionary maps of the alleged Cretaceous time period and mapped out where they assumed the ancient oceans were covering the land and leaving behind Cretaceous deposits, even though many of these places today have no Cretaceous deposits. Now, much of it does. For example, the Austin chalks and Cretaceous limestones are in a huge portion of the Southern American Middle and West. They are found in England and across much of Europe, the Middle East, and Australia, and yes, even Antarctica, even though I didn't mark it on this map, with fossils identical to those found in the Gingin chalks of Australia. So just based on what we do find of these deposits today, that layer truly is a global layer, found literally on every continent. Most of the rock layers, like the fossil clam layer on the top of Mount Everest, are regional in size. In fact, that's one of the reasons we know so much detail about the fossil content and type of rocks at the top of Mount Everest. The Friendship Highway of Lhasa to Kathmandu has rock cuts cutting through those very layers of rock 90 kilometers or 55 miles away from Everest. Those layers continue much farther than that. So in other words, you can follow those layers across provincial or state boundaries, crossing through multiple countries and multiple continents, like the Austin chalks that the late Dr. Derek Ager mentioned. Both the old Earth geologists and young Earth scientists agree that those layers containing sea fossils were on the seafloor and were raised up by tectonic activity to where they are now. Now, while yes, there is exceptions, in general, everyone agrees that those layers were laid down horizontally and in sequence. And in general, those layers can be traced right across countries with some discontinuities or unconformities here and there. But even taking that all into account, everyone agrees that the lower layers had to be there first before these new unconforming layers were laid down. But they were all laid down horizontally because they are generally parallel to each other. The entire stratigraphic record, including the layers containing the dinosaurs. And many of those layers, we all agree, were laid down by water because they have fossil sea life in them, including the layers containing the dinosaurs. So with all of us in agreement, let us reverse the sequence of events. Flatten the mountains so they are the seafloor and all the layers are basically horizontal. Because some of those layers were connected across what was then Pangaea, the supercontinent, that means that before Pangaea broke up, all of the continents were flat and underwater at the same time. It's only logical. Because all the layers are effectively parallel to each other, we can conclude that it was only after they were all laid down that they buckled together into the continents and mountains that we have today. So going back in time, this translates to a global flood. In fact, it's been primarily the young Earth creation scientists who have been spearheading the research documenting the extent of the various major sedimentary structures around the globe. And that's not speculative mapping like I did. That's actually tabulating exploratory boreholes and wells drilled deep into the ground. Let's take a quick look at dinosaur fossils. I've had repeated attempts to mock me by the anti-creationists who, once again, are in way over their heads trying to troll me with, so do you believe in dinosaurs? What kind of a question is that? Yes, I believe in dinosaurs, don't you? Well, they're millions of years old. Really? Is that a fact? How many dinosaurs have you excavated or studied out in the field? Oh, none? Well, I happen to have had the privilege of excavating and studying dinosaur fossils and tracks, or studying the geology of the dinosaur-bearing layers in 4 different US states and 3 Canadian provinces. Go get some excavating experience under your belt and we'll meet again and compare notes. Because one thing I can tell you is that the dinosaur fossils don't come with a date stamped on them. The age is assumed and assigned. And as you'll see in later lectures, there's plenty of reasons to question those ages, especially because there is not a single scientific reason to conclude that they are millions of years old. Not one. Now, some skeptics might say, well, what about carbon-14 dating? Oh, yes, what about it? Well, hold on to your horses. We'll come back to that. But let's just say that as a matter of fact, the creationary scientists are the ones who have been documenting carbon-14 dating on dinosaur fossils. And some of those carbon-14 dates came back as younger than the carbon-14 dates from fossil humans. So there's plenty of scientific reasons to conclude the dinosaurs are actually very young, and not one shred of a reason to conclude that they are millions of years old. For the moment, though, I'm focusing on the layers in which we find the dinosaurs. If you get the chance, do stop in to visit Dinosaur National Monument in Utah. When you get there, they've put a big roof over top of the dinosaur quarry, and they've excavated many dinosaur bones and left them in place so you can see how they are found. Here's a bone, a bone, a bone, a bone, more bones, 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 bones. Those dinosaurs have all been ripped apart and buried together. Now, what on earth would do that? We'll explore that question later on. Right now, what we're going to do is turn around and take a walk due east. We'll walk about 100 miles, 160 kilometers, and we'll be walking on that layer of dinosaur bones. We'll get to this top secret location, excavations hosted by the Creation Evidence Museum. This is the excavation site on the side of this hill. Usually the lead excavator is Joe Taylor from the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum. He even looks like a paleontologist. So Joe is sitting beside a field jacket we just ripped out of the ground, and it's hard to see, but this black spot right here is actually a broken dinosaur bone. There are so many dinosaur bones that we didn't really have a choice. As it is, that block probably weighed close to 500 pounds already. So here's another excavation spot at the same site, and you get about 3 to 30 bones per square meter. That's about a square yard for my American friends. All of these flags, all of these pieces of plastic, they all mark fossil bone. And I assure you, not one of those bones had a date stamped on them. I know because I looked. So, this bed, this layer of dinosaur fossils, is not just incredibly populated with dinosaur fossils, but it's regional in extent. We just hiked 160 kilometers from Dinosaur National Monument to get to here, and we still haven't gotten to the edge of the layer. In fact, as geologist Dr. John Morris points out in his book, The Global Flood: Unlocking Earth's Geological History, that dinosaur-bearing layer, called the Morrison Formation, is so huge it covers 10 states and 3 Canadian provinces. What on earth happened to these dinosaurs that would rip them apart by probably the millions in numbers and bury them all together in a massive, regionally sized sheet of mud, which has now turned mostly into rock? When you get to Dinosaur National Monument, you'll get a big hint. They have a nice little display cabinet with fossil clams in it. Now, why do they have those clams there? Because even though the dinosaur bones are copious in numbers, like I said, 3 to 30 bones per square meter, it's still clams, not dinosaurs, which are the most abundant fossils found here. An interesting side note, they say they belong to the family Unionidae, a group still existing today. Now, they will claim that these fossils and the dinosaurs and the rock layers are all around 150 million years old, give or take a week. I don't agree with that age. It is assumed and assigned and is a baseless conclusion. Nevertheless, let's go with their numbers for a second. These clams are still around today, unchanged. 150 million years of evolution has caused these clams to evolve into clams. This is called stasis in the fossil record, and it is profound and powerful evidence refuting evolution and affirming the biblical account of creation, where 10 times in the first chapter of Genesis, it records that God created life to reproduce after its kind. But we will visit that topic again later so you can see for yourself how prolific stasis is in the fossil record. But pay close attention here. Notice also what they failed to mention in their display. These fossil clams had been buried alive in the mud along with the dinosaurs. What on earth would bury clams alive in a mud layer covering 10 states and 3 Canadian provinces, simultaneously ripping apart and burying dinosaurs by the bazillions?
Coming up in the next Complete Creation.
This geological column that I'm sure we've all seen depicted, clearly showing the evolution of life throughout the rock record and clearly showing older rocks to younger rocks. This geologic column, as depicted, can only be found at 3 different places on planet Earth. You can probably see where I'm going with this. Verify it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. This geologic column only exists in 3 different places on planet Earth: textbooks, museum displays, and in the minds of people. It does not exist in physical form anywhere on planet Earth. And even if it did, the fossil order would be invalid anyway. We could not look to this fossil sequence and determine an evolutionary timeline. Let's take a look at why that is.
You can catch the entire series in a variety of ways. You can watch the show online at www.completecreation.org or www.genesisweek.com. You can also purchase the Complete Creation series in full high definition on Blu-ray or video on demand at completecreation.org. Or support the Miracle Channel with a monthly tax-deductible donation and access the entire Complete Creation series in high definition through Corco, Miracle Channel's video on demand service. We need your support to keep this program on the air, so please pray for us. And if you wish to financially support the program, Canadians can make a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, K2K2P4. Or you can make a donation via PayPal online at ianjuby.org/donations. And thank you for your support.